Well, kids, welcome to another edition of Rimshots with Sean, brought to you by Barstools and Bandtalk. I have a very special guest here. You might recognize him, but he needs no introduction. Mr. Jeff Scott Soto. How are you, sir?
Nobody recognizes me, and nobody has any clue who I am. Trust me.
Oh, please.
In the grand scope of things, it's been lovely that I've had I've had the opportunity to do what I've always dreamed of doing, and I still get to do it. But again, the grand scope of things, I'm still working. I'm still chiseling my way to having stuff like in your background, like a little Kiss mug and all these little things that everybody knows of around the world. So
Don't
it's
be
a
like
work in
me and
progress.
don't be like me and do your part to send Gina Paul's kids to school. I was
The
trying to
40-year
think.
work in progress.
Yeah, that's right. I was thinking all day about trying to ask you a question that you haven't been asked a million times before, and really all I could come up with was, what is slam?
Well, in a nutshell, Slam was it was a project thing came together. It's ironic because everyone that was in a band called Bo Nasty, that was the where George Bernhardt was the guitar player from Slam, was in a band called Bo Nasty. Everybody else in that band I'd worked with in the past already. I'd worked with first it was Brian Young, who was the other guitar player in the band with George. The drummer Mike Tirana, I worked with him with an act called Kuni, who was a Japanese guitar player, and the bass player Doug Baker. We also were working with Kuni, so I worked with all the guys. I knew all the guys. Of course, I didn't work with the singer because I'm a singer. And the band broke up, and I just got this random call from George. We'd known of each other. We met each other through Bonassi and everything, and he said, "Hey, man, I got a bunch of songs that I'm working on. Maybe we can demo up." And we weren't looking for a band. He was looking. He just wanted to. He knew my voice, and he wanted to work together with me to see what we could create together and finishing the songs that he had. And I loved from the jump. I loved them. I was totally into that whole funk rock thing between Extreme and Living Color and Dan Reed Network, all that stuff that was going on back then. I really, really soaked it in and loved. And George was kind of leaning towards that direction as far as that whole groove funk heavy thing. And I said, "Hey, let's turn this into something." We did the first four songs together, and it was effortless and it was easy. We got along great, and it to the last day, the last song that we worked together, there was never any, "I think you should try this," or it was such an amazing, easy process and a mutual respect we have for one another, that the songs basically wrote themselves. And he let me be me, I let him be him, and it just sounded so natural and organic, but it sounded like something I really wanted to do. And that's the culmination of all the demos that we put together within the 2 or 3 years that Slam was in existence. We had different levels and different phases of the band. That's what you have here on this album. They were all demos. We got a demo deal from a label back then, but it wasn't enough to make a whole record. So instead of hiring a studio to make like 2 or 3 song demo, we put the money into a home studio. We bought all the things that we needed, and therefore even if we didn't get the deal, we could continue creating. And it's exactly what you have there. We could have spent the money on 2 or 3 songs. Instead, we spent it on what turned into be an entire album of demos.
Well, it's funny. I like what I like, and I'm sitting there listening to it, and I'm going like, why did I never hear this material before? I mean, from the very, from one to, I think there's 15 or 16 songs that I heard. Just doesn't let up. I heard a little bit of King's X maybe in there too, with some of the vocal things that were going on. Mind blowing.
At that point, I wasn't so much I wasn't yet a King's X fan. I grew into that. I eventually got to be a massive fan of theirs, but I hadn't quite yet discovered them yet. But it was just a natural progression. We all kind of came from the same influence and the same kind of lane that we were all heading towards. So yeah, of course that's going to be in there based on the fact that I have a lot of influence that Doug Pinnick and the guys in King's X had or have, and we were all kind of following each other's lane. And even Extreme, for instance, that we have a song in there called "Dance the Body Electric," was very heavily influenced by Extreme. You hear a lot of "Get the Funk Out" on that particular track. It was intentional because we wanted to focus on trying to expand on that style of music. Unfortunately, by the time Slam got started, the whole grunge movement was happening, and we didn't even get the door slammed on us from the hair metal people. They weren't looking at us as a hair band. They were looking at us, this completely doesn't work compared to what's coming down from Seattle right now.
Yeah, and I guess that was would be my next question, because where I live in Halifax, Nova Scotia, we actually had we were called Seattle Light, in the fact that Sub Pop
Ah,
came up
right.
here and signed a bunch of records or albums, and it was funny because you'd be playing in bands for years, and there'd be people that be together 2-3 weeks that are literally playing 2-3 weeks
Right.
getting signed to record deals. So that's pretty much what I guess ended Slam and your run. Is that accurate?
Pretty much, yeah. I mean, again, at first we just wanted to write and write and write. Just it wasn't like we were okay. We wrote enough songs for an album. Let's do it. We're basically just trying to entice labels. We're trying to get things moving for the band, and unfortunately, there were a few changes within the lineup, and that's one of the reasons why even on this album, I wanted to make sure we formatted the sequencing of the album kind of in order of how those songs came about. I didn't want to mix them up, and because you'll hear the difference of where we evolved to musically and creatively towards the end. That's basically, and that to me was the ultimate version of what I wanted from the beginning for this band. The first few songs were, you can hear more of the commercial kind of safe influence, and then the kind of the middle section of what we were doing. That again, you started leaning towards what became the latter part. There were three phases to the band.
So you said that band was together about 2 years. Did you ever have a chance to take that band out and play in front of
Yeah,
people or do anything like that?
we
And I'm
did.
guessing the reaction would have been pretty immediate and pretty positive.
It was great again, but it wasn't enough. It wasn't like we were selling out shows, or we were creating such a buzz that the labels were all coming down. We just couldn't get any kind of label buzz. It was I think they were all afraid of committing to something like this, knowing that it would have been such a chore, especially as I said earlier, the way the whole grunge movement was changing the whole scene. And it was to the point where they didn't want to take the risk or the gamble, because obviously they knew it would be a very expensive one if they were looking to be rewarded by it. So, and when you see the reality of some of those bands, even a band like Extreme, they ended up kind of changing their course of action as well. The first two or three albums were they kind of set their standard, and then by the time they got Waiting for the Punchline, it sounded like they were from Seattle. It sounded like they were, not that they were conforming to it, but they realized they could not just do what they were already doing, and if they wanted to continue on. And that was the mindset of all of us. We're like, now what can we do? What should we do? It's got to sound real. It's got to sound organic and authentic. It can't sound like we're just following trends. And I refuse to follow trends. I actually took a sabbatical from doing original music and joined a disco novelty nostalgia band called Boogie Nights for a few years, because I had no place in music at that time. From '96 to 2001, I just laid low. I'm like, screw this. I'm not going to try to compete with something that has no interest in what I'm trying to do. And so I took a little left turn, and I let it kind of simmer off, and then I came back in, and the rest is whatever history I've created since then.
Well, and I mean, you're being very, very gracious, because obviously, you're definitely known as one of the hardworking guys out there. You don't lay low, or you haven't for some time. When that
Yeah.
material, and you guys were trying to, I guess, unleash that, were you maybe getting any feedback from labels about, oh, this isn't the Jeff Scott Soto we know, or this isn't the material we're used to? Because I hear your voice in that stuff, and I'm like, this is like, yeah, I dig it. And it sounds like you, but it's kind of like, it sounds like, it could be anybody. It doesn't, you know what I mean? So it's like, were you
Yeah.
getting any of that feedback from labels or anything?
Yes and no, unfortunately. And again, I was joking earlier, or kind of semi-joking about nobody knows who the hell I am. But even more so back then, when you think about my career, really ultimately started in '85. The first thing the album was '84, but nothing was really, the ball didn't start rolling until '85, when we did the first tour, my first outings with them. Now, you have to also remember, from '85 to say '88, I was looked upon or known as the guitar player singer. I wasn't doing anything on my own accord. And that's why I eventually started and joined. I didn't start, but I joined a band called Eyes in '89. We recorded an album, and I was trying to now change the course of how people perceive me. I didn't want to just be a metal screamer. I didn't want to be just a ballads guy. I wanted to be all the above. When you're influenced by a band like Queen, there's no choice in the matter. you're going to be chasing every color of the rainbow out there. And that's what I was doing. I wanted to show people I was more than just a one-trick pony, that I was just a metal guy or a singing, screaming guy. I wanted people to hear me and see me in so many multifaceted musical endeavors. And that's what one of the beautiful things that Slam helped me. It helped me creatively, even though a lot of people didn't get to hear it, except for a really big underground following that we developed by these cassettes that were going out to labels and everything. I know people around the world that have a lot of these songs that they, third, fourth generation down, that they have, and they love them to this day. So when we announced we were releasing this record, they're like, finally, I can get real solid, clean copies of these songs I've been listening to for decades on these crappy cassettes. But going back to what you were saying, yeah, we just realized that, I realize if I have to conform to something that's not me, I'd rather not do it.
Well, it's funny when Dave he sent me the presser, and he sent me the material, and I'm like, oh yeah, okay, I wonder what this. And I heard it, and I'm like, whoa, because honestly, I was really into that stuff, like Living Color, Extreme. That there was a kind of a, we'll call it 90 to about 93, where that music was very cool and it was riffy, and even if you're a guy like me that couldn't dance, you could kind of move, you know what I mean? It was just very intricate. Would you guys have any, is it just going to be a release it to the world and this is what we did, or do you have any plans to maybe try to take it somewhere and play it somewhere?
No, I mean, George is pretty much retired as far as touring. And I mean, we actually, for a microsecond, we discussed the idea of maybe re-recording all this stuff in a proper setting. We have all the tools and technology now to make it the way it should have sounded compared to the demos that we did. The money we spent on the home studio, when I'm talking home studio back in those days, it was a Porta studio, the Tascam 8-track Porta studio, and our masters were cassette tapes.
Yep.
It wasn't like the reel-to-reel. It wasn't like digital Pro Tools and all the things we have now. So George I wonder if we should actually redo this and do it for real. And I thought, you know what, there's a magic that we created then. My voice can never be replicated from the way I sang back then. There's no way I can sound like that now. There's no way I can even hit a lot of those notes, and a lot of the energy that I put on those songs is completely different from my approach and the way I do things now. So why are we going to tarnish something that people know and remember, even if it wasn't properly recorded? Everything was done on a drum machine because of the lack of tracks.
Right.
He would program the drums, and we'd put them down on 2-track stereo, and then we'd start building the rest of it. And there was tons of overdubs of Fly Me. You hear all the stories of how they did Night at the Opera back in the day. Queen, they did so many overdubs that you could see through the tape. That's pretty much what we did, except for they were little bitty itty bitty cassette tapes. And yeah, we were lucky that we had the beginning stages of samplers. So when I did all the backing vocals, I didn't have to fly them in with tape. I was able to sample them and then trigger them from a sampler and fly them in that way. That saved a lot of time and gave us the capability of making it sound like I heard it in my ears. So it's amazing how, when you listen to that, all of that stuff was done on a little 8-track studio in George's bedroom. And it's incredible the sounds and the sonics that we got out of that little, the bandwidth that we got out of that little machine. And so I wanted to, not only, we already captured the magic, I wanted to release the magic the way we did it back then.
I think it sounds pretty darn good, my friend. Every time I talk to a singer, especially a real singer, as opposed to, because you're known as that guy, when you're in the studio, how do you work? Like, do you like to do the song all the way through and sing it and punch in? You like to do it line by line so you can get what's your
line by line? Okay. And it's only line by line for one reason, and it's everybody's got their method to their madness. For me, I tried all of the above back in the day when I first started, and the one thing I hated most was singing with an engineer on the other side of the glass, with somebody punching me in, especially when we had the old tape days, the old reel-to-reel days. I would say, okay, take it back to the beginning of the verse, and they'd go back, and it'd be like 30 seconds before the verse, and you're just sitting there going, oh my God, wait. Okay, I sang, I started with the wrong word. Let's do it again. Can you get a closer? And you have to explain yourself. That's what took so long in recording back in those days. It took more time explaining what you wanted to do, where you wanted to punch in, where you wanted to punch out. And it was very early on. I would say by 1990, I had it mastered, where I could just have the engineer set up the mic, set up my compression, and set me up in the control room with the actual controller and the microphone, everybody out of the room and I recorded my own vocals, I would get so much more done that way. I would be more productive. I would be more time effective. And the results were way better. There's so many songs I listen to this day that were done the old fashioned way that I go, oh my God, I wish if it were up to me, I would have changed that, fixed that, altered that, whatever. Now I have that capability, and I've had it since the early 90s. To this day, I do not like singing in the room with anybody. They have to hear when you're cracked, when you're pitchy, when you say the wrong words, when you say fuck in between, whatever. I don't like anybody watching. To me, that's I don't mean to be so personal, but it's kind of like somebody watching you masturbate. You don't want people to watch you doing that. So I would rather get the job done, everybody come in and listen, and then go, wow, this is great. And then you can give me your notes and your preferences and things after the fact. But I like to get it out of the way, how I hear it, how I feel it. And yes, as I told you, I do line for line for line for line. I get to the end of the song, and then I don't believe it here. I'm pitchy there. And that's where I can kind of correct things as I go. I've done the routine of, we're going to sing it from the beginning to the end. You're going to do it again. You're going to do it again, like have like 5 to 8 different versions. You leave the room and an engineer's picking what he or she believes are the right words and lines to complete the song. To me, that was so lame. It blew out my voice. It didn't give me the opportunity of choosing what I felt were the better performances. So I'd rather give somebody one final track and say, this is it. This is as good as it's going to get. Move on. Next.
And I'll wrap with 2 things here, Jeff, and you can answer. The first thing is, I want to ask you, because I always like to ask singers this, is there a favorite producer that you have that you like to work with when you record? And then I guess the second thing is, and I was really trying today, I was thinking about, okay, I see your pieces on different podcasts. You're asked pretty much the same things every time. I'm actually glad I was told stick to the slam stuff, because I mean, how many times can we cover this or cover that? But do you get tired of being asked the same thing over and over? And I mean, you graciously always answer it, but does it get to the point where it's just like, really, do I gotta answer this question again?
I'll answer the second question first. I don't get sick of it, and the main reason I don't get sick of it is because sometimes I'll answer something and I'll walk away an hour later and go, damn, I wish I added that to it. And that gives me the chance to answer things the way I might have done it differently had I had the opportunity to really, or we do like a pre-interview. We're going to do the interview. I get my answers across. I get to think about what I want to say, and then we're going to do the real one. It's kind of like that. So when you're asking me, or someone is asking me, or several are asking me something that many have already asked, I've kind of processed how I want to answer that question, because it doesn't necessarily have to be prefabricated, but sometimes there's an answer that is more complete than the one I'm giving if I'm just off the fly. So I don't get sick of it. And the other reason for that is that I don't get sick of it because your format might be touching upon some people that this person's format's not, or that person's not. So it'd be good to get that information to as many people as possible, as opposed to just saying, you know what, I already answered that one, let's move on to something else. That person watching your podcast or your format wouldn't get that answer. They'd have to now dig around for other things to get more answers, etc. So for me, it's par for the course. There's some things that you're going to have to answer multiple times, and there are times you kind of perfect how to answer them. So I don't mind them. Regarding your producer question, as I said, I don't like working with anybody in the room. The last time I did that, it wasn't so bad because we had more laughs and we were more goofing around than the usual sessions when you're serious and making records. Was the first Sons of Apollo album. I had Derek and Mike Portnoy just basically right there next to me as I'm singing with headphones, and they had headphones, and we're chiseling away and going through everything. And again, I prefer how I do it, and I would rather give you my interpretation of a song and you tell me what you want me to fix or change later, as opposed to doing it on the fly and me singing for 4 hours a day. I prefer saving my voice and getting more done properly. But as far as a producer is concerned, the only one that I actually recorded in the same room or in the same presence was Paul O'Neill from TSO. And the reason why that for me worked more so than working with somebody who's trying to produce me for my music and my energy and what I hear is I had to give him something that he wanted. And there's a difference between what he wants for his songs and his creations than something I would say, oh, I hear it this way, I'm going to give it this way. working with Paul was such a unique experience because I learned a lot of things I normally didn't have in my arsenal before that. And now I've taken a lot of the stuff that I've worked with O'Neill and put it into other things. And from that, I expanded. I actually got something from working with Paul O'Neill as opposed to working with a Mutt Lange or somebody who just, nope, sing it again. No, sing that line, sing that word again, sing that phrase again. I'd rather work with somebody in the sense of like TSO, where I'm actually delivering something that they have in mind. And until we get it right, I can continue doing it over and over. Because if I took a TSO song and did it at home, I'd have to do it 500 times before he would say, okay, now I think we're in the right ballpark. But doing it with him, he would say, let's sing it from soup to nuts 3 or 4 times. Let's not blow out your voice. He would comp and find the right lines and find the right sections that he wanted to keep. And the next day would say, okay, we just need to get that one. We move on. And it worked. The process worked for Trans-Siberian Orchestra.
Well, we're gonna wrap because I know you're a busy fellow, but we might have set a record here today. We didn't cover backing tracks once, so that's gonna knock us out of Blabbermouth because that's every second story on Blabbermouth, right?
Yeah.
We stuck to Slam. So
Yes.
tell everybody where they could find this, because I tell you it's well worth the listen. I've been listening to it since the last 3 days since I got it. Where are they gonna find it, Jeff?
Well, my socials always, I'm always making sure that everything's up and current. And even on my Instagram, I have a link where you can actually directly order different parts of the world. For the most part, I'm assuming Amazon or anywhere you're buying digital music, for instance. It might take you a little more digging to find the physical copies. The physical copies have pretty much dwindled and diminished, but people still want it. So I would say the easiest way is to, obviously to go onto the label site, 20th Century Music. You can find it there, and you can always find links to that stuff on my socials, and my socials are linked to my main site, which is jeffscottsoto.com. So it all kind of intertwines, and the power of Google, you can find anything. So
Absolutely.
And yeah, I mean, you talk about the backing tracks, that whole discussion, the conversation is just played out to death. What I don't understand is bands were doing it back in the 80s. Why is it such a hot topic now? The band Eyes, we had all these big Def Leppard backing vocals going on when we were playing live. And yeah, some people say, oh, you guys are using tracks. Yeah, and that was it was done. It's been done with pop music, it's done with everything throughout the years. Why is it such a hot topic now in 2023? It doesn't make sense to me.
This is a gentleman by the name of Eddie Trunk and these guys, and I think that's why it just keeps going on. And we'll just leave it at that because
I get
you're right.
And I, to each his own. And for what you need backing tracks for to get through a show, to present your show, I'm on both sides of the fence. I side with Eddie because I absolutely agree. When you go see a band live, when you're paying money to see a band live, you're not paying to see them doing a playback. But I also understand the other side of things. Sometimes you can't deliver what the song should sound like. Yeah, there's a band like Queen. They never relied on doing what they did in the studio live. They were 2 completely different animals. In the studio, they multi-tracked and made them sound like to reproduce that, you need 120 people on stage with you. And then when they did it live, it's 4 guys just pulled it off in a different way, but it had the same energy, it had the same vibe. And so I understand Eddie, and I understand others that rely on that. So I'm kind of in the middle. I still to this day use it for like drum loops, for keyboards, certain keyboard patches it took like 15 keyboards MIDI'd and linked together to create a sound. And you get some little Casio when you're doing a gig in Wisconsin that they get you the wrong keyboard that goes bam, bam, bam. You can't recreate it. So I'll have some things that are important elements to a song on a playback to make sure that it's there and it blends in with what we're doing live. And so it's apples and oranges, man.
I hear you. And I'm a drummer, and I know it's a skill set to be able to play with tracks. So, I mean, that I just, and up here in Canada, the Canadian labels actually more or less demanded that the artist did it because they wanted everything to sound so close to the record.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
Anyway, my friend, I appreciate you doing this. Like I say, Slam, I love it. I haven't stopped listening to it since I heard it. Best of luck. What do you have on the go just before we wrap up? We caught you at a downtime here, but you have very little downtime.
Boy, do I have one I wish I could talk about right now. It's going to drop. I guess I can say that. I mean, I'm not giving anything away by saying it's going to drop in September. Because there's no pretext. There's no pretense going on. Nobody knows what what's going on with this thing. So all I can say is there's something new, something bold, and something badass that's going to happen in September that I'm really excited about. And we're really looking forward to taking it out on the road pretty much all of 2024. So that's what I'm looking forward to. I've got the TSO tour coming up. I've got a bunch of other little projects, the bits and bobs that I'm doing. I'm leaving for Jakarta on Sunday night. I'm going to be in Indonesia doing some gigs out there at stadium shows, and going to Austria to do a couple shows with the Prague Philharmonic Orchestra, Rock Meets Classic. So I got a lot of irons in the fire, but for the most part, as far as band stuff, the real like band album release stuff, there's something happening that's going to drop in September, and everybody will know soon what that is.
I'll be knocking on your door to get a part 2, my friend. Thank you so much for doing this, Jeff.
Thank you, sir.
You have a great day.
Have a great day.
Peace.